From your local election headquarters, the following program is a special presentation from YourErie.com and the Manufacturer and Business Association.
John Cray and our Board of Governors and the entire staff of the Manufacturer and Business Association for the second and seemingly more exciting of our candidate forum series this morning, featuring candidates for United States Senator right here in Pennsylvania. Before we get going, just a little bit of housekeeping, and we'll go over the rules. But first, I would like to acknowledge a few of our board members that were able to join us this morning. John DeArmond from Channel Lock Tools in Meadville. Mark Ramey from Welder Supply. You can clap for him, it's all right. Appreciate it. Jim Greenleaf is here from Greenleaf Corporation in Sagertown. And Debbie Utt, I think I saw you walk in. Debbie Utt from Professional Communications. Thank you all so much for being with us today. And as an amazing treat for everyone, we also have with us an elected official, a pretty important one, in fact. Pennsylvania Treasurer Stacey Garrity is joining us this morning. Thank you, Stacey. Thank you for being with us. And I'd like to thank Jet24, Fox 66, YourErie.com for their partnership in broadcasting and live streaming this morning, as well as the PA Cable Network. Thank you guys so much, and all the news outlets that are patched in this morning to join us and re-air portions of today's forum. And lastly, and obviously, our candidates who agreed to participate. As you can imagine, it wasn't the easiest thing to do, but we're very excited. And of course, a little bit of a shout out, just because I think it's worth it, is both Kathy Barnett and Jeff Bartos actually drove from Philly overnight just to be here this morning because they were at an engagement yesterday evening. So they might be a little sleepy, but thanks for joining us.
They look good.
Obviously, this forum was put together to help our members be well informed on the issues and learn from the candidates firsthand rather than rely on, our favorite 30-second commercial spot, which we all love, your commercials, no doubt. But we hope that the candidates also learn a little bit about our organization and the actual needs of the business community. And if you watch as much Jeopardy as I do, these candidates probably don't need any introductions because you saw their commercials, but we're going to go from left to right. On your left, you have Dave McCormick. To his left, your right, is Jeff Bartos.
Morning.
Kathy Barnett, and of course, Mehmet Oz.
Good morning.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
To keep things fair, the seat placement was decided before our panel by drawing of lots. They picked a number out of a hat, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how that position was decided, and that's also going to be the order of our questions. The first question will be given to Mr. McCormick, and then each candidate will have the opportunity to answer the same question, and then question 2 will begin with Mr. Bartos, and so on. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer the same question, and the candidates will have 90 seconds to respond. Now, we have a really convenient, which I know you're going to pay attention to, just like you drive, a very convenient street light in the back with green, yellow, red lights. Green means go. Yellow is your 15-second warning to start wrapping it up, and red, please stop. Please stop. I would like to get to more than like 3 questions. And then at the conclusion, each candidate will have the opportunity for closing remarks in which they can say their stump speech, their closing shots, whatever things they'd like to have covered that wasn't covered, and they'll have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to do that. The topics we'll cover will be those things of interest to the business community, and specifically our members. Our goal today is to deliver a professional forum for our members and the voters consistent with the reputation of the Manufacturer and Business Association, and I hope consistent with your reputations as well. The candidates were asked to focus their replies on the topic in question and obviously refrain from making any personal attacks against their fellow candidates or interrupting someone else's time. You're running in this race. We'd really like to hear what your thoughts are on these questions. In the unlikely event that that does occur, I will kindly suggest and redirect the candidates to keep to our agreed upon rules. However, this will obviously cut into their time allotment. So, without me speaking anymore, let's get started. And we're going to start with a nice softball question, but I assure you the rest are not this easy. 1.5 minutes, David McCormick. We all have different motivations for why we do things, and obviously the biggest question is why? Why run for U.S. Senate? So, what drove you to run for the United States Senator here in Pennsylvania? You have 1.5 minutes.
Great. Well, thank you. It's nice to be with you all. And the thing that drove me to run for the Senate is feeling like the country is headed in the wrong direction. You have a set of policies that have been put in place by the Biden administration on the economy that's driving inflation, on energy policy that's driving up the price of gas, killing our energy industry, on the border, which leading to a surge in fentanyl and crime in our urban areas, moving to the suburbs, and a set of social issues where there's curriculum being taught in our schools that's inconsistent with the exceptional America that I think many of us know. And so I'm running for office to push back on all those things, to fight for pro-growth economic policies, to fight for a return to the America First policies that President Trump put in place, which I think were taking us in the right direction. And I'm running as someone who doesn't need on-the-job training, someone who has experience, is battle-tested, someone who's served in combat, someone who's run 2 companies, helped create 600 jobs in Pittsburgh, someone who's signed the front of the check in a number of different places, someone who's worked at the highest levels of government. So I can step into this position on day one and be able to make a real impact to take America back in the direction that we know and all love, and to take America back in the direction where the American dream that many of us have had, that we want for our children, is available for all Pennsylvanians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Mr. Bartos, same question.
Good morning. It is great to be back in Erie, and thank you so much for having us. My name is Jeff Bartos, proud son of Berks County, Reading, married to Cheryl for 25 years this November. Cheryl was raised in Lehigh, and we are the proud parents of Emily and Sarah, who are 21 and 19, and we proudly raised our girls in the southeastern part of the state. And I was very proud to represent all of you as the Republican nominee for Lieutenant Governor back in 2018. I'm running to save Main Street, Pennsylvania, and those are not just words. When the pandemic struck and Governor Wolf shut us all down, I jumped into action. Now, I couldn't have done this without 5 years of experience of traveling around this state and all the relationships that we built. I led the effort, but it was inspired by my friend Pete Snyder. It involved dozens of volunteers, but I proudly led this effort to save small businesses that were shut down by Governor Wolf. We raised $3.5 million, helped over 1,000 businesses keep the lights on, 44% black-owned businesses, 57% women-owned businesses. It brought together the best of Pennsylvania at a very dark time, and it is the stories of those entrepreneurs, those women and men, their perseverance, communities coming together. That's what inspired my run for the Senate. I personally spoke to over 600 of those business owners. Their stories are why I am running. If we had more common sense business people on the floor of the Senate, on the floor of the House, and yes, at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, first of all, we'd do less stupid things, and all of you in business know, do less stupid things, and we'd have common sense solutions to the problems plaguing the Commonwealth and our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bartos. Kathy Barnett, what drives you?
Yes, thank you so very much for having me here. What drives me is truly an authentic love for my country. Our country is in trouble. Most people know that. We're traveling over 1,500 miles all across the Commonwealth, and people feel squeezed right now. People feel unnerved right now. People feel very fearful about what their future holds for them and their families. I understand that very well. I grew up on a pig farm in southern Alabama. I grew up below the bottom rung of the economic ladder. I grew up in a home with no insulation, no running water, an outhouse in the back, and a well on the side. When I say poor, we were so poor we couldn't afford the other O. We were just po. But my family never told me I was a victim. My family never told me all the odds were against me. They never told me because I'm black, because I'm a woman, because I'm poor, all the odds are against me and I might as well not try. And that allowed me to become the first in my family to go and finish college. I spent 10 years in the military, worked in the financial industry at A.G. Edwards & Sons and Bank of America Capital Asset Management, a corporate America, an adjunct professor of corporate finance, authored my first book, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain, Being Black and a Conservative in America, and did so many different things, homeschooled my kids, a lot of different journeys in between. I only did that because this is the greatest country that has ever existed, but she is in trouble, and I am running specifically to preserve this America for the next generation because she is in trouble.
Thank you. Mehmet Oz, what drove you to run for the United States Senator here in Pennsylvania?
I grew up less than 10 miles from a place called Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. It's literally the opposite corner of the state. It's the mushroom capital of the world. My father would always tell me that I should not do what mushrooms have to do, which is sit in the dark all day long, get fed manure, and then get canned at the end of it all. During COVID, I felt that happened to all of us. But actually, it had been happening prior to COVID. So you all know what the issues are in Pennsylvania. You're in the manufacturing community. You're 10% of all the jobs, you're 10% of the output of our state. You know firsthand the issues that all of us have been seeing as we visit with you. And I've been to the area a bunch of times and have met with many of you. I was in the space talking to many of you. The reality is that when you take a top-down government authoritarian approach, one size fits all, which is what was done during COVID, but it also was done in many other areas that we can discuss over the course of this debate, you will fail. This has been talked about for 200 years in economic theory, but it's definitely true and proven firsthand with what's happened in America over the last 2 decades. And this top-down, again, authoritarian one-size-fits-all approach mandates that we ask a bigger question, which is why I came and why I'm running. Because we are in crisis. And the question we have to ask is, why is Washington getting it wrong? We know they're getting it wrong with inflation, with mortgaging our kids' future. We know they're getting it wrong with our school systems. We know we're getting it wrong with energy policy. I mean, it's like right in front of us, we're seeing the wrong answer made when there's a 2-answer opportunity. You think it should be 50-50 to get it right. But they're getting it wrong over and over again because they don't share our values here in Pennsylvania. And specifically what they don't understand is there's a victim mentality and they're oppressors and they're trying to deal with the victims and push the oppressors down. We can do better.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Question 2, we'll go start with Mr. Bartos. On the campaign trail, then candidate Biden said to a climate activist, "I guarantee you we're going to end fossil fuel, and I'm not going to cooperate with them, okay?" 2 years later, it almost seems the president is working to keep his promise as gas prices are soaring. The blame has been placed everywhere, and now due to sanctions on Russia, Europe is also in desperate need of a new supply for liquid natural gas. Now increasing domestic product production has slowly become actually a bipartisan issue. What position should the U.S. take on energy?
In the 5 years that I've had the privilege to travel around the Commonwealth and representing conservative values and fighting for our economy, fighting for our future, fighting for main streets across Pennsylvania, it's clear, very clear. And if you travel around the state the way I have, you know that our energy industry is a critical, if not the critical factor to make main streets flourish and to make sure that our greatest export stops being our children and starts being natural gas, energy, and our great agriculture communities. But what we've seen, and Kathy and I talked about this in Lawrence County back in January at the first debate when we were on stage together, Pennsylvania's energy resources are the key national strategic tool in the arsenal of the United States. The Biden administration has literally gotten everything wrong when it comes to energy policy. They told us what they were going to do, Jezra, you're absolutely right. They told us what they were going to do, and then they did it. We should not have a war in Ukraine right now. The war in Ukraine is directly related to the fact that we had weakness in our withdrawal from Afghanistan, but also President Putin knew that we were not going to put America's energy resources on the global stage. We were not going to flip tankers to our allies. We were not going to build pipelines here in home. We were not going to help send our gas and our resources here around the world. Pennsylvania's energy resources, all of us, we're not just living through history, we're making history here in Pennsylvania. We Pennsylvanians, as we always have in the history of this great nation, we have the opportunity to lead forward and make a more secure world. It starts with our energy resources. I've traveled the state for 5 years. I've been fighting for our energy industry. When I get down to Washington, I'll continue to fight for pipelines and for Pennsylvania energy.
Thank you, Mr. Bartos. Kathy Burnett, U.S. energy policy.
Yes, I'm going to ditto what Jeff said so I don't have to repeat it and use my time for something to add on to that. Energy is freedom. It is not just national security freedom, but it is personal freedom as well. There is, I was saying earlier to a gentleman out here in the audience is that I would have respect for Democrats, if that was possible, if they said in Pennsylvania, more than almost 50% of our energy source comes from natural gas. Less than 4% of our energy source comes from renewables. I could have respect for them if they said, listen, we are against fossil fuel. We're going to make everyone live on 4%. Of course, we will all die, but we're going to live on 4% until we build ourselves back up, right? But they don't say that. What they say is, I want America to intentionally cripple herself, cut her nose off despite her face, shut down fossil fuel, and then get on our hands and knees and go crawling over to Venezuela, to Iran, to Russia, to our enemies to get what we have the ability to provide for ourselves. Germany and specifically Europe is learning a very difficult lesson of what happens when you get in bed with the devil. They are no longer capable of determining what their national security is going to look like because over 50% of Germany's energy comes from Putin. More than 46% of Italy's energy source comes from Putin. And now they cannot make the necessary decision that they should be making. And that is is exactly where
Thank
we
you.
find ourselves today.
Thank you. Member Oz, U.S. energy policy.
Judge, we could host a talk show here. So let me build on my two colleagues and move it to the next level. This afternoon, I'm going to be driving down after having lunch with Greg Rubino to Pittsburgh to host an energy summit. And at that summit will be the father of fracking, Harold Hamm, Energy Secretary under President Trump, Rick Perry, who's endorsed me this week. He also was the governor of Texas, knows a lot about energy, as Texas and Pennsylvania, the two biggest energy producers in the country. And Toby Rice, who you all know, is the biggest energy producer, a real star in the field here in Pennsylvania. And the message we're going to deliver, and I'll speak to this as a scientist, just like with COVID, as a doctor, I could say what they're telling us with these mandates is dishonest. It's a narrative that will not work, and we're paying a price that often our kids bore, using them as a shield. In energy, as a scientist, I'll tell you the Green New Deal is a lie. It's not just unfair because we're sacrificing our energy independence. Actually, we want more than energy independence. We want energy dominance. That's what we deserve, what we have. We're giving it away for a false narrative, the Green New Deal, because we cannot power this American economy with windmills, and we won't be able to do it for a while. But let me blow your mind with an idea. If we were to use our natural gas right here from under our feet and use it to replace dirty coal from overseas manufacturers, it would be the equivalent of electrifying every U.S. car, plus putting a solar panel on every roof, plus doubling wind energy production all together. And we're giving that up for no good reason except the ideology that carbon is bad, which itself is a lie. Carbon dioxide, my friends, 0.04% of our air. That's not the problem.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick, U.S. energy policy.
Well, first of all, I agree with what Jeff said in terms of the situation we're in with Ukraine. And really, this is the long pole in the tent of economic renewal for Pennsylvania. This is the path back to bringing manufacturing jobs back to Pennsylvania. It's really the key to a vibrant economy. And you should all be asking, I think, which senator can take that fight to Washington and make the biggest difference. And this is one of those things where I think we should spend time on it. And Mehmet, in your particular case, on your shows and in your columns, you've argued for more regulation in fracking. You've made the case that there's health defects from fracking, and you've argued for a moratorium in Pennsylvania like that's in New York. And I think
I'm sorry, that's not true.
Well, excuse me, Mr. McCormick, if we could please just stay on focus on how you...
No, hold a second, Judge. You let him attack me. Didn't stop until they attacked me. That is wrong. That's a lie, and you know it's a lie. You've been running those ads over and over again, claiming things you know are dishonest.
We had an agreement that we are going to...
Judge, then enforce the law.
And I'm enforcing it right now. And please, Mr. McCormick, please finish your answer and keep it to how you would handle it.
So I think we should all be held account to our own words and to what we've said. And I'll certainly be held account to what I've said, and I think we all should.
Thank you for that. All right. We almost got through two full questions before the fun started. So let's go back to something a little more agreeable, but something that what the role of the federal government is. This question will first be taken by Kathy Barnett. Unemployment levels are much improved from a year ago, but no doubt remain one of the largest issues for employers. We're hearing it everywhere. No doubt you've heard it on the campaign trail. And its effects on our supply chains are still being strongly felt. Is there a role for the federal government to improve this situation, and how do we handle the supply chain shortage? Kathy Barnett?
Yes, earlier one of my opponents up here on stage talked about, kind of like a talk show. This is not a talk show. This is reality, and we need people who understand what the issues are and who don't simply sit in a room, learn our talking points, and then come back and parrot them to us. We need authentic voices for the Republican Party, and that is what I'm offering you. What do we need in order to grow our economy, to increase, to get people back to work again? It's not rocket science. We know that jobs follow capital investments. Jobs follow corporations who are willing to locate, invest, and produce in a particular country. But right now, we do have a tax code that is biased to sending our jobs to other countries. We have a hostile environment that has been created. Who in their right mind, let's just take energy again, who in their right mind would invest the necessary capital in in America when you have climate change buzzards who are hovering around looking to litigate, looking to throw you under the bus. We just had that very thing happen in Bradford County. A company there in Bradford County here in Pennsylvania was getting ready to go online to producing over a million gallons of liquid natural gas a day. And because of how much they were being litigated and held up in court, all the regulations and the permits, they decided to shut that down just last week. We're in a moment where we need greater capacity, and yet we've created a hostile environment. Stop creating a hostile environment. Get someone who understands our issues.
Unemployment and the role of the federal government to help the supply chain issue.
I lost the train of thought because I thought we were talking about unemployment. You pivoted to energy again. Energy is part of the employment issue.
Because that is where people get their jobs. That is a large industry. Well, he called my name again. He called my name. He referenced me.
You're not going to reply. These are the rules we all agreed upon. Please adhere to our agreed upon rules, and let's keep
Then do not call my name.
Mr. Oz, please continue. Unemployment and the supply chain in America.
It's like a dual reality.
And you live in that.
The unemployment issues that this state needs to address are primarily based around, and I think many of you actually, let me ask, how many of you could use more employees? Yeah, most everybody in the room. As I travel around the state, I see frequently people clamoring for more help just to be able to run their businesses. It actually makes me very optimistic about the future of Pennsylvania because I see the opportunities we have if we're allowed to actually fully employ. So I was at Coterra in the northeast part of the state. It's a big natural gas facility, but they have a career tech facility that they're sponsoring. And it's pretty cool to see what career tech can do. Take young kids out of high school, train them to be able to work in the energy space. Or frankly, there's a culinary school there. There's a nursing school there to get LPN licenses. It's wonderful to give young people an opportunity to work, but you have to train them to get there. Part of the false narrative that we push young people into is they need to get 4-year degrees, oftentimes studying underwater basket weaving, things that aren't going to have material benefit to them as they graduate. And then we end up with debates about how to pay for these expensive educations, which are transparently like owning a Lamborghini, right, without the benefit.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick, unemployment and the role of the federal government with supply chains, and please keep your answers to your position. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just make three comments. First, with regard to unemployment and the employment status in Pennsylvania, one of the things we have to do is make sure the federal government isn't paying people not to work. And that's part of what's happened under the Biden administration. We have to stop that. Second thing we need to do is create pro-growth, deregulatory economic policies that really unlock the potential of Pennsylvania. Energy is a core part of it. There are other things we can do, but energy is really the key to driving our economic growth in Pennsylvania and all the good things that will follow in services and manufacturing and other things. The third thing is to build on what one of the others said here, is that we do have a skilled workers gap. And there is all sorts of things we can do to have businesses partner with our government at the state level and also at the federal level to ensure that we have the emphasis on redefining what a successful career can be with skilled training that meets the needs of our manufacturers and our businesses here in Pennsylvania. We don't have enough of that today. There is too much of an orthodoxy around a 4-year education, and we need to return to the past in some sense where you could have a great middle-class existence, go on vacation, own your home, send your kid to college with these great skilled opportunities. We don't have enough of a match between the people that want to do those jobs and the training to allow them to do it. The Trump administration in the last year had a real emphasis on that, and they made a real difference. We need to continue that.
Thank you. Mr. Bartos, unemployment and supply chains.
So my whole campaign from day one has been focused on saving Main Street, Pennsylvania. Now at the heart of this, I'm a kid from Reading, a proud manufacturing and industrial town that has fallen on hard times. And all of you, whether you're invested here in Erie County, whether you're in Crawford County, in Meadville, I met some folks from Meadville before, I know exactly what your views are and you know what my views are because we come from the same place. And so this whole campaign is about fighting for towns like Erie, like Meadville, like Reading, like Cheryl's hometown of Allentown. I'm fighting for you, and unfortunately, good for the television stations, not good for anybody else, this campaign has devolved into fights on television. Many of the candidates, and this is no disrespect to them as people, they're fighting each other and they're fighting for a Senate seat. I'm fighting for you. This answer is really simple. President Trump, and great credit to Senator Toomey for leading in the Senate on this with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, the Trump administration's policies had us with the best economy in our lifetimes prior to the pandemic. Now, there wasn't the best economy in every town across Pennsylvania, and each of the 67 counties has unique needs. And getting back to what we need to do at the federal level, get pipelines in the ground. We need, whether you call it a Marshall Plan or an Operation Warp Speed for energy, we need to get FERC out of the way. We need to greenlight permits. We need to get pipelines in the ground, because saving Main Street, Pennsylvania means healthy, vibrant economy, and that starts with our energy industry. It starts with our ag industry.
Thank you.
We can do this here in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. All right, for our next question, we're going to turn to inflation. Amendment Oz, you will be first. A recent NPR ISPIS poll showed that 40% of Americans are worried about higher prices. 94% are aware of the rising costs for food, energy, housing, and others. Inflation hit a 40-year high of 7.9% recently in February. And now the Federal Reserve Board has taken steps through several overnight interest rates increases at 0.25%. However, 9 times since 1961, the central bank embarked on a series of interest rates to rein in inflation, but 8 times a recession followed. What should the role of the Fed's Federal Open Market Committee have over our economy? And what steps can be taken to combat rising inflation? A minute and a half.
So there's several factors that are driving inflation to the 40-year high you mentioned. Some of them are monetary, which I think the Fed can help with, but with great risk. Some of them are shortages from supply chain issues, and then we have some underlying drivers like energy pricing, which is probably the easiest for us to address. With gas prices the highest in 15 years that we all are experiencing in many ways, and our farmers are especially hurt by that. And the frustration people have because they know that the gas beneath our feet could actually address that issue expeditiously. We're giving up easier options to drive down energy prices and give American consumers and businesses a little bit more breathing room. Manufacturers consume 1/3 of all the energy in Pennsylvania. So you really bear brunt of these high energy prices, and that by itself could help. I am dubious about the ability of a series of sequential interest rate hikes to be able to control inflation without leading us into a recession. There are gentle ways of landing into a tighter policy, but it's hard to do it when you have this rapid increase in inflation rates. I did study business at Wharton Business School when I was in medical school. I've enjoyed learning about finance. My specialty was healthcare finance, but I followed these issues carefully, and I think as a United States Senator, I'd be able to opine on them and support them. The supply chain issues, which are the part that I should leave you all with, that's the harder part. That's the part that drives up prices because you've got shortages. And the big fear I have is not inflation, it's actually devaluation. The possibility that we might suddenly one day have a lot less value in our money because people don't trust the dollar because it's based on the confidence in the U.S. economy. And we are undermining that during the Biden administration.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick, the role of the Federal Open Market Committee and rising steps for inflation.
Well, inflation's killing us. We all feel it, but working families particularly feel it. People on fixed incomes, elders on a fixed income, it's a killer. I was in Erie a couple weeks ago and walked through the center of town and talked to a number of small businesses, and this is really a big problem on small business owners. And it's the direct result of Joe Biden's policies. 3 things: overspending, the surge, the fiscal surge that's happened under Joe Biden. I mean, we haven't had, Republicans aren't on the high ground on deficit control over the last 2 decades, but what's happened the last year is without precedent. The terrible handling of the Fed over the last 18 to 24 months, Jay Powell should have been replaced, and energy policy, which energy is a direct input in everything else. So these policies can be fixed if you know what to do about them, and they need to be reversed. And as someone who's served at the highest levels of our government on economic policy, somebody who's run a couple businesses like Jeff, when you're creating jobs, you see the impact this has. You have to have a feel for that and put policies in place to make a real difference. On supply chains, there's supply chains and there's supply chains. There's strategic supply chains, and I cannot believe that we're at the point where we're dependent on China and other countries for our pharmaceutical industry, and we're dependent on the rest of the world for our semiconductors, which are at the core of everything we do. We have to bring those supply chains home. That's going to not happen overnight, but we can't be strategically dependent on other countries. We can't be strategically dependent on China. That's a key part of the economic agenda. Bring the strategic industries home.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bartos.
Well, thank goodness the Senate stopped 2 nominees of the Biden administration, one to Treasury and one to the Fed. The Fed nominee that just withdrew a week or 2 ago, her policies were to punish any big bank or any finance company that was going to be financing energy. Now think about that. We are in a crisis of inflation, manufacturing, our economy, and this is what the Biden administration was going to do. That was at the Fed. In the Treasury, they had I think it was a communist, like an actual communist who wrote about Russia and loved Russia. Imagine that. That would have played well had she gotten through the Senate. So thank goodness the Senate at least at 50-50, we can stop some of these disastrous nominees. But I want you to, for a second, step into the mind, if you can, of a left-wing ideologue. I know that's scary, but this is what they think. This is what's running the Biden administration. First, we're going to kill energy, and we're going to give all of that sovereignty and all of that power over to other countries, and we're going to build a Green New Deal. That's their first. Then they give money to people to stay home. Give money to people to stay home and not work. Then, now that we've got this runaway inflation, now President Biden's budget that he just put out, his draft budget, wants to raise taxes on everybody, including seniors. Now, senior citizens, and we all get to meet senior citizens across this great Commonwealth, they are struggling. Every Pennsylvanian working family is struggling. Senior citizens are struggling. 5 years ago when I campaigned, I heard about people losing their houses to increase property taxes. Now the Biden administration wants to tax the imputed increase in value on your home. This is going to drive seniors out of their homes. We need Republicans to fight for working families. This is our pathway to winning in November.
Kathy Barnett.
Yes, the question is regarding the Federal Reserve. Inflation is high. And unfortunately, there is no cap on it. You guys are business people. You understand that. There is no ceiling on how high this inflation is going to go. And the Federal Reserve is primarily responsible for it. And now we're looking to the Federal Reserve to try to fix it. Imagine, if you will, an economy looking like a bicycle, right? And when Republicans get in office, we have a bike on this bicycle. You have two pedals. You have one pedaling tax cuts. The other pedals deregulation. But imagine if the chain on that bicycle is the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve, and if the chain is broken, no matter how fast you try to pedal, you're not going to go very far. And the chain on our bike of this economy is the Federal Reserve, and it's broken. We remember these last 2 years. I've studied economics, I've studied finance, I've worked in the financial industry. I had never heard of the term transitory inflation until it became convenient for the Democrats to make it up. And as a result, we find ourselves where we are. The Federal Reserve, and this is something that the Senate has oversight to do, is to clarify the mandate of the Federal Reserve. Their mandate should be stabilizing the dollar, not waiting until people start getting employed and then wanting to put a brake on the economy. So they need to stabilize the dollar. That also goes into your ability as business people to invest. If the dollar was not going up and down, you would be able to predict what your results are going to be, and you will invest more. That is what we need to do to rise the tide.
We're going to move on to the next question. Thank you. This next question will begin with Mr. McCormick on the end. Columbia University finance and economics professor Glenn Hubbard recently stated in a Wall Street Journal article that Western democracies now face a more uncertain and dangerous world than they did several weeks ago. He believes the U.S. should spend more on defense, but notes that significant tax increases like those in President Biden's $5.8 trillion budget proposal would increase the corporate tax rate to 28%, risk economic growth, and require fundamental tax reform. What tax reform measures would you propose to next year's budget to spur economic growth? A minute and a half.
Well, I think the starting point here is that I disagree with Glenn Hubbard, and by that I mean I think the policy we should have going forward on taxes and the economy is to make permanent the Trump tax cuts, and then put really strong pro-growth economic policies in place that grow our economy, deregulate, and unlock the power of our great economy. We had those policies largely in place under President Trump, and we've gone the opposite direction under President Biden. And so that's the first thing we need to do. But we also need to match that with true fiscal prudence. And we haven't demonstrated that. We haven't demonstrated under President Biden, and we haven't demonstrated that previously. And so we need to go hard at our budget, and we need to have a real tough-minded view on that. In the area of defense, where he's making the argument we should increase spending, I know defense quite well. I don't think the problem is that we need to increase spending in defense. I think the problem is how we're spending the money we have in defense. It's a $750 billion budget, and we're spending much more looking backwards than forwards on the kinds of technologies that'll position us to win into the future. And the focus of our Pentagon has gone much more to the social agenda than it has to key warfighting. And so we need to have the right leadership in place at our Pentagon to make sure we're warfighting ready for the dangerous world that lies ahead. And we need to have the right people at the helm in the economic area to make sure we have pro-growth economic policies, but also fiscal prudence and get that balance right.
Thank you. Mr. Bartos.
We had, as I said before, the best economy in our lifetimes prior to the pandemic, and that was directly related to the policies of the Trump administration and a Republican Senate that was fighting, and a Republican House that were fighting for economic growth. It is not beyond the realm of Americans to get back to that place and grow from there. It's just 3 short years ago. And so the policies that work, which is cutting taxes, cutting regulations, let me be very clear. We should be cutting the corporate tax. We should not be raising the corporate tax. I believe we should be investing more in hard assets in our defense. We need more ships. We need more drones. We need more ability to supply allies overseas when they face crises. We're seeing the brave Ukrainian people fight for their freedom. They're not asking for American troops. They're asking for weapons. As Senator Sass said, if it shoots, ship it. We should always be in a position to be able to do that. So we need strong supply chains. But let's paint a vision. We're all manufacturers in this room. We love Erie. We love Crawford County. We love the northwest part of the state. This is a proud manufacturing hub. We won World War II because of places like Erie and Pittsburgh and all these wonderful industrial towns across Pennsylvania. My whole campaign is about saving Main Street, Pennsylvania. That vision is a reality if we unlock energy, if we lower the burden, if we get pipelines in the ground, and we onshore or nearshore manufacturing. Pennsylvania can once again be the workshop of the world, and a lot of that can be done right here in the strategic location that is Erie County. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy
Yes.
Barnett.
Yeah, you know, so I mean, even in the way you set the question up, there's so many things we can talk about, right? Because our world is certainly more dangerous today than it has ever been, and it is as a direct result of the weakness of the Biden administration. As it relates to our economy, again, I've already explained to you how the economy works, right? You have the bicycle, you have cutting taxes, you have deregulating, you have the broken chain of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve needs to be fixed, right? So that's that. We need to stabilize the U.S. dollar. But again, as I said earlier as well, jobs follow capital investment. But who in their right mind will invest in this country when you have the monkey on their back, when you're looking at our onerous tax system, when you look at our exports and imports, when our exports go into other countries, and other countries, it is loaded down heavily with our own tax system going into another country, and now you have that. You have imports coming in to our country heavily subsidized, and they're not competing on a level playing field. So we need to take a look at that as well, right? But again, we need to begin to create a hospitable environment for people to invest. Jobs will flow where businesses are willing to locate, invest, and produce. And right now, it goes right back down to energy. Energy is in everything. If we want our economy to grow, we need to look at making America strong again, making America energy independent again.
Thank you. Mehmet Oz, tax reform in next year's budget with rising corporate net income tax.
I would not raise taxes. We need more value for the taxes we're already paying. And throwing money at problems with false beliefs that they'll make a meaningful impact is not going to help any of us. Paying people not to work has hurt everyone in this room. I invented the little catheter devices to fix heart valves from the leg. I started these companies with great ideas that I thought would prosper immediately. I wrote the patents for them at Columbia University. We commercialized them. It took us almost 20 years to get these devices into clinical use because of overreaching regulations that did not really protect anybody. Just to give you an idea of the efficacy of these devices, they reduce the chance of dying from heart failure if you have a leaky valve that this fixes by 50%, and it drops the costs of medical care in that situation by 50%. So despite the fact that it saves lives and costs less, it still took us almost 2 decades to get through it. And the only way to get through it was to sequentially give it to bigger and bigger businesses who are large enough to fight the corporate war that's mandated by Washington due to the regulatory process. So in addition to keeping taxes no higher than they are and ideally lowering them to make it a more hospitable environment, we have got to reduce the regulatory burden on American businesses. It is suffocating us. All of you in the room know this firsthand, and it puts us on an uneven playing field with foreign countries who often do the exact opposite, make it easier than it should be for their businesses to do things, even if they're not the ideal thing for their own country, because they know it works when they sell to America.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Mr. Jeff Bartos. Polling has been consistent that Americans believe Congress to be dysfunctional. and it's polarized along political lines. Unfortunately, the evolution of political disagreements has actually morphed into contempt for our fellow Americans. Harvard professor Arthur Brooks writes, "To overcome disagreements, we must never insult someone into agreement. We must never assume the motives of another, and we must use our values as a gift." Leadership and civility are desired qualities of a candidate for U.S. Senate. What is your approach to work across the aisle and with the White House to grow industries unique here in Pennsylvania? A minute and a half.
My whole focus is on saving Main Street, Pennsylvania. And I look at every policy and every interaction through the lens of a kid from Reading who wants his hometown to flourish again. And all of you feel the same way about sitting here in Erie and in the northwestern part of the state. When the pandemic struck and I looked around at seeing how I could help, I don't own a PPE factory, I don't know how to sew, I didn't have a lot of things I could do to help. But I know how to raise money and I know how to bring people together. And when I started the 30-Day Fund, when I started with that effort of focused on saving small businesses, really in the southeastern part of the state, and then it blossomed into a statewide effort, I put a board together. I didn't ask what the political affiliation of those board members were. I certainly didn't ask what the political affiliation was of the students, the great students at the University of Pennsylvania who really powered every day the engine of that nonprofit. I assumed they were all Democrats. Maybe some of them were Republicans, but they're students, for God's sakes, at Penn. I certainly didn't ask, as we started getting money out the door, and I had the privilege to call those small business owners, I never once asked a small business owner if they were a Democrat or Republican, left, right. I didn't frankly ask any of their political views. If you were from Pennsylvania, you were putting capital and hard work and sweat into that business, you were employing people in the state that I love with all my heart, you were my guy, you were my girl, and I was going to help you. We achieved all of that because we took politics out of it and we focused on the mission. We can do that in the Senate, we can do it in the House, we can do it with the White House. Remember, there's a far left and then there's everybody else. We can work with sensible people who care and share our values across the spectrum.
Kathy Burnett, leadership and civility, and how do we work across the aisle for Pennsylvania?
Yes, I heard a quote, change people or change the people, right? Either people are willing to be reasoned with and you can change their mind on a particular issue, or we need to pivot real hard and begin to change the people out of those offices, right? That is the reason why I'm here. I am your change, and not that Obama change that left us broken and bruised, but I am the change. I am you. So I will go there and I will be a change in that particular seat of things. But I will look for the Joe Manchins in the Senate, right? Who would have ever thought? But I will look for the Joe Manchins. And where I can find reasonable ground with people, I will work vigorously to make sure our ideas and our interests are represented, right? But when you're talking about certain things like an open border, because within the Democrat Party, we need to recognize Democrats are out here in a street fight. We need Republicans who have a backbone made of something a little bit sturdier than ear cartilage. We need people who understand the issues and who will go toe to toe for our interest. So when we're talking about open borders, for example, and within the Democrat Party, you have a very hard, radical left in there. That is not something I'm willing to negotiate on. I believe Republicans must be something more than just a speed bump on the way towards communism. We need people who will fight for what it means to be a republic and who will uphold the U.S. Constitution.
Thank you. Mehmet Oz, leadership and civility and working across the aisle. Thank you.
I think Republicans bring index cards to culture war knife fights, and we get slaughtered. And the reason that we've lost civility is we've ceded the middle ground where the public believes reality lies. This is actually something I've spent my whole life doing, fighting on the biggest playing field there is, which is on network television, going after big pharma, big agrochemical companies, big tech, even the U.S. government, when I see narratives that are being put forward that condition us to think a certain way. The reason Washington is getting it wrong is because they do have different values, as I pointed out, but specifically they're getting it wrong because they made those values the same values that are respected by corporate American leaders, by media companies, and when you have big government, big media, and big business all with the same storyline, that's totalitarianism. That's why we're losing. Because the basic insights that we believe make sense, you talk about it at the dinner table as I do, you talk about it in your boardrooms and with your employees, it's not reflected when they're making policy decisions in Washington. We need a bold, loud voice in Washington, not to beat up on Democrats. I don't get up in the morning and hate Democrats. I talked in my opening point about the salvo of comments in my campaign about looking in the eyes of each other and seeing the divine light, the spirit that's there, respecting each other. I know that most Democrats would agree with our values, but we have to express them without arrogance, without abrasiveness, with a certainty that we're right, because the realities of life, as Margaret Thatcher said, are conservative.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick, leadership in civility and working across the aisle.
Yeah, well, I've spent my whole life in positions of leadership. It started with the military, and where Kathy and I share that experience, where you didn't know whether you're a Democrat or Republican, but you were brought together by a common mission of supporting our great American country. And we now see ourselves at a crossroad where there's a huge battle for ideas and the direction of our country. And we see one set of ideas under the Democrats, the extreme left, and Joe Biden. And we see another set of ideas that we're putting forward, which is America First conservative principles that President Trump put in place and that we need to build on. And so we need to have people in Washington that can go and fight for those ideas. It can be civil, but we can't compromise on the principle. The stakes are too high. We can't step back. We have to step in. We have to have someone who's going to fight for those principles, fight for the direction of our country, and bring those along. Joe Manchin's a good example. Who we can find common ground with, but we can't sacrifice on principle. I guess the final point is we need to elect someone for this Senate seat who authentically believes the things they're saying. So you need to pick someone who's demonstrated those conservative principles through time and is going to take that set of consistent principles to Washington and fight for them and won't waver when the bullets start flying, which they inevitably will.
Thank you. All right, we're almost there, guys. We have now come to the part where they have their closing comments. I would like to kindly remind everyone, any interesting factoids about your person sitting to your left or your right, we will no doubt watch tonight while watching Jeopardy. Please refrain from those right now. We're really curious to know how you would answer, how your closing comments on why we should pick you to be the next U.S. Senator, not why our opponent shouldn't be chosen. With that said, I will take a deep breath. 2 minutes and 30 seconds for the closing statements. We are now beginning with Kathy Barnett. Thank you.
Oh man, I thought I was going to go next. I wanted some of his time.
I took it.
If I have time left, I will yield it.
Okay, start my time back over again. Start my time back over. Okay, now I'm starting. Listen, these are very serious times. Our country is at a crossroad, and we need people who understand that. I understand that. I am the only true conservative Republican on this stage, right? We may have some Republicans. We have some who have their entire public career, they pretended to be a liberal, working beside Oprah and Michelle Obama.
Please keep your comments to what you would
conveniently,
do.
they are a conservative Republican.
Jessary, she's attacking me in public, and I'm going to defend myself.
Mr. Ross, please interrupt their time.
I'm not going to let you say that.
So
We all have friends.
I'm going to talk over
So we're
you.
going to mute the. We are going to mute the.
Bishop, you're not following the rules. I follow the
We
rules.
are now going to mute the
following
rule.
This
We are going to
is-
mute the microphone. I will continue to talk until we stop. Thank you.
And when
Your
you start
time
talking,
may
I'm gonna
now
talk over
continue,
you.
and please tell us how you would like to handle it. Please
These
carry on.
are,
Thank you.
again, these are very serious times. We have, name an issue. Our country is on fire right now. And we need people who understand that. And most of you are sitting on the sidelines because in the Republican Party, we have this crazy notion that we only pick the richest person in the room who's willing to run for office. How has that served us, picking the richest person just because they're the richest person? What have we learned nothing over these past 2 years with Democrats putting their foot on our throats, putting their foot on our businesses, putting their foot on our children? How many times have you called your elected official who just so happened to be the richest person in the room and asked them to stand up for you? And how many of them over the past 2 years have stood up for you? You need a fighter. You need me as much as I need you. I can't do this without you, but we are doing it without all the money because people have come around us, and I have the most amazing grassroots infrastructure that is up here on this stage. I proved it when I did a record for the state of Pennsylvania and turning in the most petitions, over 12,000. That does not happen. But I didn't have to pay someone to do it. I just turned to my grassroots. I am the only candidate who can win in the general election. I proved that when I ran in 2020, the number of people that I had coming to my side.
Thank
I'm
you,
the only
Kathy.
one who can do it. Let's do this together. Thank you.
We have 3 left to go. I'd remind you, please let your answers be respectful, and hopefully it reflects your own reputation as well as respecting our reputation here at the Manufacturing Business Association. So with that, 2.5 minutes, Mehmet Oz.
You should all ask yourselves, why is everyone attacking me? What
Because
am
you're
I?
a liberal.
Please stop interrupting.
That doesn't work, Cesare. You know, I've hosted a lot of events, thousands of hours of television, but you can't speak and say things that are negative and let people get away with
Why
it.
not?
You're not doing your job.
If you was,
This is
I
cutting.
would not
all
have
right,
to go
both mics will be
scorched
muted.
earth.
We'll cut it.
Well, you can
You'll
cut off
get your
my.
toe.
You can cut it off. I
Kathy,
I would
please
not
stop.
have to go scorched earth
Kathy,
if they
this
would
is not
show
what we
up for
agreed
a
upon.
debate. They would
And this
not
is
show
not
up for
the-
a debate.
Your
They would
staff
only do
agreed-
forums.
Your staff agreed that we would not conduct this forum in this manner. I'd ask you to please
I have
stop.
earned my place on this
We
stage,
heard your point.
and I would not be told what I can and cannot say. These are very serious
Please.
times.
All right, your point has been made. We all understand it. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Mr. Oz, your time was paused, and you may continue.
When I decided that I would burn the boats to give up a television show, the top health show in the world, 13 years, 10 Emmy Awards, stopped all the books. I've sold 20 million books probably. Stopped the businesses. You guys are in business. Imagine being so compelled, so worried about your country, that you would give it all up and not feel an inkling of remorse for it. To feel cathartic almost, that you'd given all that up because now you can actually do what you know at the end of your life you'll look back on and realize was necessary, important, and perhaps the most important contribution you'll make. Like all of you, I'm in the change business. Like you, I'm an entrepreneur. I did it in my office, taking care of patients. I always empowered them to take charge of their well-being, to lead the highest level possible, to be the best they can be. I took it in the television in part because I realized that patients weren't getting the message because I wasn't giving it to them. In fact, the medicine wasn't. And we needed to give that to patients so they could be truly empowered. And I did that with great success. I am called to move into public service. I have a lot of other things I could have done. Just like all of you are probably thinking, geez, would I have done that? Given everything up to be attacked right and left continually. I don't mind being attacked. I'm pretty thick-skinned. I learned that doing lots of things. In heart surgery, when things don't go well, you get thick-skinned. All right, you got to deal with it and take care of the next patient. I certainly learned it on the big stage of television. I've hosted Jeopardy. You brought that metaphor up twice, Cesare, today. I've hosted that show with, fairly positive results and raised $250,000 for my kids' foundation, Health Corps, that has raised $80 million in total, helping kids. I know what it means to make a difference. That's what I'm going to do as the next senator from Pennsylvania. I'll be able to represent you with a bold, loud voice to express all the concerns you're meaning. We cannot have a backbencher Republican senator.
Thank you, Dr. Oz.
We need someone on the front lines to be Pennsylvania, the top 5 state that we are.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick, 2.5 minutes. I'd like to remind everyone, all the jabs can be saved for the evening television. This is a business audience, and we don't have the appetite for that sort of thing. 2.5 minutes. Okay. The time is yours.
Thank you. So I'm a 7th generation Pennsylvanian. My mom was born in Punxsutawney. My dad was born in Plumville, and I was born outside of Pittsburgh in Washington and grew up in Bloomsburg. And I had a rural upbringing. You know, I played sports, wrestled, and I played football in places like Shikellamy and Chickashinny. And I hunted, and I worked on the farm, baling hay and trimming Christmas trees. And I got to West Point on wrestling. And then I served in the 82nd Airborne Division, went to the first Gulf War. So the first 28 years of my life, and my view of America and all that America has to offer was really formed in those 28 years. And then I came back after the Army and went to Pittsburgh. And I ran a company there and helped create 600 jobs. So the majority of my life's been in Pennsylvania. I have a family farm, and I feel a deep commitment to what I see happening in our state and what I see happening in our country. And I'm throwing myself into this because I believe I can make a difference. I believe the weakness and the wokeness is taking our country in a terrible direction. And I believe that I can be the kind of leader that can authentically go to Washington. I'm telling you what I believe. I'm telling you what I'm going to fight for, and I will go do that. What you see is what you get for me. I think the stakes couldn't be higher. I don't think we have time for people who need on-the-job training. I think the crisis is such that we need the right people in office tomorrow. And every day I'm driving across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in my pickup truck from my family farm, and I meet people in diners and VFWs and so forth, and the energy and the fear for where our country is going is palpable. And I'll leave you with a story, but it sort of brings home to me why I'm running, and I think many here might be running, is I was in a little diner in Lehighton, and there was a little TV camera that was filming, and I did my little talk and then asked people to ask questions, and they did. And then at the end, an elderly woman stood up, and she said, "Thank you for your service." She said, "I've been watching you. I think you're going to win. I hope you win. And I want to tell you about my son, Michael." And she told me about her son who volunteered for the military after 9/11, went to Afghanistan, was in the middle of a really terrible set of combat situations, and came home and struggled, had PTSD, didn't really tell his family he had PTSD, had a wife and a small child, and ultimately killed himself. And she handed me a gold star, and she said, "Listen, if you get to the Senate, I want to make sure that you focus on this issue. Focus on people like Michael. There's too many people killing themselves every day." And those kinds of issues, those kinds of people are why I'm running and why I want to go to Washington. Thank you.
Mr. Bartos, last word.
So I want to thank all of you for being here this morning. There's a lot of things you could do with your time on a Wednesday morning, so thank you for being here. And I'm going to give a special thank you to our State Treasurer, Stacey Garrity. I am deeply, deeply grateful for Stacey's endorsement and support for well over a year now before we even had a campaign. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for fighting the Wolf administration. Thank you for everything you're doing to fight for our conservative values. And I also want to give a shout out to my friend Kathy here. We've traveled tens of thousands of miles over the last year, and the frustration that you see and the passion that you see from both of us come from being on the campaign trail for me for 5 years, really for 5 years. And so when we look to our televisions and see people, as I've been calling them, political tourists, and there's no disrespect to the people up here, but they've come in,
It's more of a compliment.
they've come in and they're spending, tens of millions of dollars on television. And we've been on the roads, grassroots, for me, for 5 years, visiting all 67 counties multiple times. For me, this campaign has always been, from day one, and always will be, about a deep love and a commitment to our Commonwealth. Like a heartfelt, at the core of who I am, belief that Pennsylvania can be the fastest growing, most dynamic state in the nation, that we have all the tools at our disposal, and that we can't, as conservatives, spend our time fighting with each other. We have to fight for you. My campaign isn't about me at all. I barely talk about myself. After 5 years of doing this, I'm never good at this, and I'm barely good at saying I. It's about you. Everything I do is about this Commonwealth. It's why I started the 30-day fund. It's why we put these crazy miles on the car. It's why we drove overnight to be here this morning. I love this Commonwealth. I love what our potential is. I love what we've meant to our American story. And a brief story about what inspires me to do this work, what inspires me to get up in the morning and fight for all of you. Later in the 30-day fund, I called a business owner in Ephrata, Lancaster County, and her name's Kim, and I said, "Kim, we have money for you." And she said, "I have a confession to make." Now, I don't do confessions. I'm not a priest. I haven't practiced law in a long time. She said, "I have a confession to make. I broke the law." And what she told me was, when the Wolf administration handed down every dumb rule that they handed down, she finally called her team together in December when she'd had enough and said, they want to shut down our businesses at Christmas time. And I told my team, I would rather pay a fine, I would rather lose everything I have, I would rather go to jail than lay off single moms at Christmas time. That is our core conservative value. It's what we fight for. It's what Pennsylvanians have. It's why I'm running for Senate, and it's why I'll represent you so well in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, hey, folks, we did it. I didn't know if it was going to happen. It happened. We got these very strong-willed personalities and maybe large egos together in one room, but for an important cause. And I want to genuinely thank them, one, for their commitment and the sacrifice it takes to run for office. It is no easy task. It is time, it is money, it is exhausting. And for that, regardless of who you support in this race, I genuinely commend you, and I appreciate your commitment to that.
Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you.
Now, on behalf On behalf of the Manufacturer and Business Association and Jet24, Fox 66, YourErie.com, we want to thank you all for either tuning in live, watching this back later, or joining with us in person. And lastly, I want to remind everyone that's the conclusion of this morning's forum, not debate. And don't forget to vote on May 17th. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
The preceding program was a special presentation from your local election headquarters, YourErie.com, and the Manufacturer and Business Association.